My brother assaulted Victoria at our cousin's wedding. I bolted down the hallway when I heard her scream, finding him pinning her to the wall. I punched him, but the police pulled him off. My mom screamed at me, not him. The cake melted under heat lamps. I used to think blood meant protection. Now he's in prison, and our parents call us traitors. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. When we were kids, Samuel shoved my hamster cage off the dresser. I was 10, he was 12, the plastic shattered, and my hamster died from the fall. I sobbed for days. Our parents told me I was too emotional, that accidents happen. I remember clutching the broken cage in silence. That was the first time I realized they'd never hold him accountable, just a cruel boy being a boy. In high school, Samuel locked me out during a snowstorm. I banged on the door for 20 minutes shivering, while he laughed from inside. When Mom opened it, she scolded me for not wearing a thicker jacket. I looked at him, smirking over hot cocoa, and I knew I'd always be the one to take the blame of that night. I hid the family photo album under my bed. Something inside me shifted for good. Victoria offered to host my parents for dinner. She wanted peace. Samuel arrived uninvited, claiming Mom told him. He smirked at Victoria all night, dropping subtle jabs when she asked him to stop. He leaned in too close and whispered something crude. She flinched. I stood furious, but Dad called me dramatic. I noticed Victoria delete his number that night. I saved the voicemail he left her later, slurred, threatening. It became evidence I'd never meant to collect. Samuel sent Victoria flowers, red roses with a card that read, "You're prettier when you're scared." She showed it to me, hands shaking. I snapped a photo before she burned the card in the sink. My mom said he was just trying to make peace. Victoria blocked him everywhere. But that night, a car idled outside our house for 20 minutes. We didn't sleep. I checked the locks 3 times. He was escalating, and no one cared. Victoria got a job offer across town. I wanted her to take it. She hesitated, worried it looked like we were running. Samuel showed up at her clinic pretending to be a patient. She called me, after locking herself in the supply room. I rushed over, but he'd already left. Her manager filed a report. My dad called it a coincidence. I started a folder, screenshots, police notes. Every whisper of his sick obsession. No one else would protect her. Victoria began waking from nightmares, calling his name before realizing it was just me beside her. I couldn't sleep either. I installed cameras around our apartment. A week later, one caught Samuel standing in our driveway at 3 and staring into our window. I sent the footage to my parents. They replied that could be anyone. I emailed the police. A case number was assigned. Victoria whispered, "He's going to hurt someone." I already knew he already had. Victoria wanted to cancel attending Holly's wedding. I insisted we shouldn't give Samuel that power. She agreed reluctantly. At the reception, we stayed close, but he was already watching. When she went to the bathroom, he followed. The scream tore through the ballroom. I ran, found him pinning her in the hallway. I threw him off, fist flying. Guests pulled us apart. Police arrived. My mom yelled that Victoria must have provoked him. That was the moment I broke inside. In the police car, Victoria clutched my hand, dress torn, shaking. Samuel sat smug, handcuffed but smirking. At the station, I played the voicemail, showed the footage, presented the file I never meant to build. Officers nodded grimly. My dad refused to come. Mom called Victoria trouble. I watched her flinch. I gave my statement and held her as she sobbed. This was no longer just about him. It was about what our family chose to protect. The trial was brutal. Samuel's lawyer painted Victoria as unstable, emotional, vindictive. She stayed strong, voice steady even through tears. I took the stand and told everything from the hamster to the hallway. Our mom refused to attend. Our dad sat stiff, glaring. The prosecutor held up the burnt card, the late-night photos, the clinic report. It was all there. But watching Victoria recount what happened, I'd never felt rage like that. Or admiration. She never once looked away. On the 3rd day, a new witness came forward, Rachel, Samuel's ex. She described nearly identical abuse, locked doors, late-night threats. Her testimony cracked something open. Suddenly, everything felt real to the court. Our dad walked out mid-session. I wanted to chase him. Victoria squeezed my hand, whispering, "He made his choice." I realized I had to. I wasn't the quiet brother anymore. I was done staying silent to keep peace with people who never earned it. The verdict came with a heavy silence, guilty on all counts. Samuel showed no reaction. Just sat back, arms crossed. Victoria cried softly. I watched the judge revoke bail, ordering him straight to prison. Our mother collapsed in tears, not for Victoria, but for the monster she raised. We didn't speak to her after. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. I shielded Victoria. That night, we opened a bottle of wine. She toasted to never needing them again. In the weeks after the trial, my parents tried to reach out. Emails, letters, voicemails, all filled with guilt, not for what Samuel did, but for what we exposed. I blocked them all. Victoria and I moved. New town, new jobs, no shared history. She started therapy. I joined her once. We left the session quiet, but lighter. On our wall, we hung a photo of us laughing in the kitchen. That became our new symbol, our real beginning. Victoria found out she was pregnant. She cried, terrified. I held her, repeating, "You're safe now, we both are." She smiled through tears. We started painting the nursery, soft greens and yellows. One night, I found her asleep with her hand on her belly, peaceful for the first time in years. I kissed her forehead. I swore to protect this family with everything I had, not just from Samuel but from silence, from denial, from everything we'd escaped. 3 years later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Rachel, the ex who testified. She said Samuel had been appealing his sentence, claiming he was framed. He'd convinced his cellmate to leak our addresses online. Victoria and I checked every lock, added cameras again. I contacted a lawyer. Rachel said she was scared too. Samuel's obsession wasn't over. Even from prison, he found ways to haunt us. We were safe, but now we were watched again. The police confirmed a breach. Our mailbox had been tampered with, documents missing. Victoria froze reading the report. Our lawyer filed for a protective order extension. Meanwhile, I got a message from Mom, "You never protected your brother." I didn't reply. We changed passwords, bought a PO box. Victoria kept glancing over her shoulder. I hated the fear in her eyes. We'd built peace from ashes, and now his shadow was crawling back, like it never really left. Our daughter Emma started preschool. One afternoon the school called. An unfamiliar man had shown up asking for her. The front desk turned him away. They called us immediately. I drove there like my life depended on it. Security footage showed a man resembling Samuel's cellmate. That night, I sat in Emma's room until sunrise. Victoria clutched the family photo from our kitchen wall. We thought we'd escaped, but trauma doesn't knock, it finds new doors to enter. We filed police reports again. Victoria added emergency contacts to the school. I met with the principal, demanded new safety measures. Meanwhile, I tracked down Samuel's legal documents. He'd been moved to another facility less secure. I called the warden, demanded answers. He hung up. The system was still failing us. I sat in our driveway that night, baseball bat in hand, waiting, not out of fear but fury. He wouldn't take anything else from us. Not ever again. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Rachel forwarded an email. Samuel's lawyer accidentally CC'd her on proof of witness tampering. It named the cellmate, their plan, and our address leak. We sent it to the DA. Within a week, charges were added. Samuel lost his appeal. Extra years tacked on. The court issued a public statement confirming we'd been targeted. Victoria cried when the letter arrived. I framed it, hung it above our doorway. Finally, someone besides us said he was guilty. Emma asked who the angry man in the picture was. She'd found an old family photo in a forgotten box. Victoria knelt beside her. Someone we used to know, she said gently. I took the photo and slid it into the shredder. Emma blinked confused, but then hugged Victoria tightly. He's not family, I whispered. That night, we told her a bedtime story not about villains, but heroes. It was the first time we rewrote our family story together. I bumped into my father at the grocery store. He looked older, thinner. You ruined everything, he muttered as we passed in the produce aisle. I didn't respond, but as I walked away, I realized something. I didn't feel rage or sadness, just distance. He could no longer touch us. That night, Victoria asked if I was okay. I said yes, and meant it. Sometimes survival looks like not flinching when ghosts pass by in daylight. Victoria started a support group for survivors at the clinic. At first just 2 women came, then 5, then 10. They brought stories that echoed ours, ignored warnings, dismissed bruises, silent screams. I watched her speak, voice strong, hands steady. She never said Samuel's name. She didn't have to. After one meeting, she hugged a crying woman and said, "We're not broken." That night, I told her she was the bravest person I knew. She said, "So are you." Emma brought home a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "That's you. Mommy and me," she said. I smiled, but noticed a 4th figure in the corner, scribbled out. "Who's that?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Nobody, he doesn't belong." Victoria and I exchanged a look. Even at 5, Emma sensed what love looked like, and what it didn't. I hung the drawing on the fridge, a reminder that healing doesn't erase the past. It reframes it. We got a letter from the parole board. Samuel's next review was in 6 years. Victoria exhaled hard, relief in her posture. "That's time," she said. "Time to live. To breathe, to grow." I read it again and burned it in the repeat. Emma danced nearby with sparklers, giggling. Victoria wrapped her arms around me, resting her head on my shoulder. "Let's make it count," she whispered. For the first time in years, our future felt like ours again. At a community fair, Victoria was asked to speak on resilience. She hesitated, but said yes. On stage, she told our story not with names, but with truth. She spoke of fear, silence, defiance. The crowd was still. One woman sobbed quietly. Emma sat on my lap, watching her mom shine. Afterward, people lined up to thank her. She smiled, hugged them. That night, she said, "I'm not just surviving anymore." I kissed her cheek. "You're leading," and she was. Emma came home with a school project. "What makes a hero?" She drew Victoria with a cape and stethoscope. "And me with a shield. You protect," she said proudly. Victoria's eyes welled up. "She's right," I whispered. That night, we tucked Emma in and stared at her sleeping face. We'd fought to build this peace. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and earned. I framed that drawing too, right next to one with the rainbow and 3 figures. One day, a letter arrived from my mother. Handwritten apology after apology. "We failed you. We chose blindness over truth." I read it aloud to Victoria. She didn't flinch. "Too late," she said. I didn't reply. I shredded the letter, piece by piece. Forgiveness might come someday, but not before accountability. I owed that to Victoria, to Emma, to myself. That evening we watched a movie. All 3 of us tangled on the couch. The silence was finally safe. We visited Rachel one weekend. She'd moved states, started fresh. Her apartment was small but warm. She greeted us with homemade cookies, hugged Victoria tight. Emma played with her dog in the yard. We sat on the porch, sharing updates and laughter. "Feels like we made it," Rachel said. Victoria nodded. "We did." I realized then we weren't just survivors linked by pain. We were builders, architects of our own peace. It wasn't the ending we expected. It was better. Victoria surprised me with a framed photo, a candid shot of us on the porch, laughing with Rachel. Beneath it, she'd etched the words "chosen family." I stared at it, swallowing hard. She squeezed my hand. "We made our own truth," she said. That night, we had dinner on the deck, candles flickering, Emma humming a tune about stars. The wind was gentle, for the first time in a long time. I didn't brace for anything. I just breathed. At Emma's first school play, we sat in the front row. She spotted us, waved mid-song, then beamed. Her joy was unshaken. Afterward, a teacher told us, "She's so confident, so kind." Victoria smiled, tears in her eyes. "She's safe," she whispered. That night, we tucked Emma in and stayed a moment longer. I whispered, "You'll never grow up afraid." As we closed the door, I saw the old broken photo frame on the shelf, emptied, left there as proof. I watched Victoria pack Emma's lunch with care, humming softly, that quiet strength that grounded me. We built this piece from rubble, choice by choice. The broken glass never fully vanished, but we learned to walk barefoot, without bleeding. I told Victoria, "You changed everything." She smiled. We did. That was the first time I truly believed her. One morning, Emma asked why we light candles before dinner. "To remember peace," I said. Victoria added. "And to keep it alive." That ritual started small but became sacred. Every flicker meant survival, choice, healing. It reminded us we weren't just survivors. We were builders. I looked at them both and thought, this is my real family. Samuel remains in prison. His appeals denied. Our names cleared. Our daughter protected. My parents, they're just ghosts now, photos I've thrown away, numbers I've blocked. Victoria's support group has grown into a nonprofit, giving others the courage we once had to scrape together alone. Emma thrives. She laughs loudly, hugs hard, and trusts freely. We made this life with trembling hands, but it stands strong. Every brick laid with purpose. The cycle stopped here. For her, for us. Forever, that door's closed and locked. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.